many of us are parents and we have our experiences, but really it's a great time to just let your children go and let them thrive and flourish as parents. And if they are seeking your advice, then absolutely provide it. There's times where you can say things like, when you were young, I found that this worked really well. And that's a gentle way to say, hey, maybe try this, instead of saying, hey, why aren't you doing this? So finding different ways to share our experiences, but also just sitting back and let the parents thrive and flourish on their own. We want to make sure that we're being helpful and supportive if that's wanted by the new parents, but also really just respecting their wishes and their boundaries, and having open communication is so important in order to make that transition to grandparenthood a great one for you.
When it comes to being a grandparent, an expert at Kansas State University suggests trying to not take the grandparent fun card too far. Instead, stay within the boundaries and expectations of the parent and spend time with grandchildren in a meaningful and purposeful way. On today's Sound Living, some tips for grandparents to maintain harmony in the family. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. According to Kansas State University Aging and Adult Development Specialist Erin Martinez, there are some unique considerations that go along with becoming a grandparent, and being aware that family relationships and dynamics are going to change is one of those. Erin, this is one of those questions that comes up from time to time, people wondering about the change in their family relationship, especially when they become a grandparent, or in some cases even a great-grandparent, and how they interact with the grandchildren.
Yeah, so becoming a grandparent or great-grandparent is a truly exciting event. It's like this momentous event in some people's lives that they've really been looking forward to. But there are some unique considerations that come along with that. And being aware that our family relationships and dynamics are going to change. We're going to have different relationships with our kids and now a new grandchild or great-grandchild. So it's an exciting event, but it can also cause some changes in our relationships.
Probably the first thing to start with is just understanding that those relationships are going to change.
Absolutely. So, we're introducing a new person into the family, and with that comes new responsibilities, opportunities, challenges. And so our time commitments can change, sort of our availability might change. Just thinking about the time that we generally spend together can look a little bit different. So that's sort of one key concrete aspect of it, is just the timing of our togetherness might look a little bit different than it did before.
And some of that is actually the communication that you have with the new parents, right?
Yeah, so communication is huge. As we know, communication is a key to healthy relationships. And we want to make sure that we leave those lines of communication open, that we're understanding people's boundaries, expectations, and those sorts of things. Just making sure that we are doing what's best for ourselves, our loved ones, the new grandchild. Just keeping each other's needs and boundaries in mind is key.
I'm assuming part of that then is remembering that they're the parents, not you, and maybe being a little bit lenient or not offering your advice maybe as freely as we sometimes do.
Yeah, and that can be challenging to sometimes keep our opinions to ourselves. And I know many of us are parents and we have our experiences, but really it's a great time to just let your children go and let them thrive and flourish as parents. And if they are seeking your advice, then absolutely provide it. There's times where you can say things like, when you were young, I found that this worked really well. And that's a gentle way to say, hey, maybe try this, instead of saying, hey, why aren't you doing this? So finding different ways to share our experiences, but also just sitting back and let the parents thrive and flourish on their own.
You probably understand this better than I do, but I'm pretty sure that parenting has changed throughout the years. Some things that my grandparents did with their kids, I probably wouldn't even think of doing with my kids.
Absolutely. I mean, things change all the time. Recommendations, safety measures, things like that. So whereas people decades and decades ago, used car seats way differently than what we use them today, times have changed. Safety standards have changed. We've learned new things. Just because you did it one way doesn't mean that we can't try doing things another way, or that as research and, practice and experience has gone on, we've learned things about how to do things differently or in a better way, in a safer way. And so times do change, and there's things that we can learn from that. That doesn't mean that what we did as parents was wrong, but we need to embrace the newness as well.
We also need to understand that there are good times to make a visit and other times that maybe not quite so good.
Yeah, and that's where those boundaries come into play. So don't expect that, the door is open for you to come whenever you absolutely please. We need to make sure that we're communicating with new parents about their expectations, what works with their schedule, and remember that baby schedules constantly change as well. So we want to make sure that we're being helpful and supportive if that's wanted by the new parents, but also really just respecting their wishes and their boundaries, and having open communication is so important in order to make that transition to grandparenthood a great one for you.
And as the children begin to age and they maybe want to take a trip to Grandma and Grandpa's, there are some boundaries there as well, things that need to be kept in mind?
Yeah, so it's so important to talk with the parents about their schedule, their routine, feeding habits, what kids are able to eat and not eat, limiting sugary sodas or sweetened beverages and desserts and all of that. It's so important that we are being respectful of other people's parenting preferences, that we're, meeting the needs of the child as well. And so try not to take the grandparent fun card too far. We still want to stay within the boundaries and expectations of the parent, but absolutely have a great time with your grandchild, but do it in a meaningful and purposeful way that we're not stepping on each other's toes.
I think it's funny that you mentioned the grandparent card, because grandparents do sometimes feel like they're entitled to spoil, and like you say, only to a certain point.
Yeah, only to a certain point is probably best practice. Absolutely. My mother certainly spoils our children, but does that within reason. We have a kiddo with, a food coloring allergy. And so that's just something that she keeps in mind, is she doesn't have that icing when she buys them a special cupcake. So, it's something so small, but just keeping in mind, those limitations, restrictions, and just being mindful of that, following that, but, still spoiling them and doing the fun things that grandparents want to do.
I know that we're seeing a large number of grandparents, great-grandparents who are watching. They're serving as kind of the child care provider. That is a whole other element, right?
Yeah, so more and more grandparents are raising their grandchildren 100% of the time, or maybe they'll be raising them for 100% of the time for a short period of time while a parent's unavailable for whatever reason. And so we see a lot more of this intergenerational caregiving, but we also see grandparents who are watching their grandchildren for an extended period of time, like over the summer. I know when I was growing up, I spent the majority of my summertime with my grandparents as they were retired, and I got to hang out with them. So we're seeing a lot more of these intergenerational relationships, which provides a lot of opportunities. But then we also want to make sure that we're not taking up too much of a grandparent's time or taking advantage of a grandparent with the expectation that they're going to watch my child or they're going to watch my children over the summer. We need to have open and frank conversations about our expectations, needs, limitations, boundaries that we want to set. It's so important to communicate.
And some of that happens even before the baby is born.
Yes. So even people who are getting ready or starting to think about starting a family, it's a great thing to start thinking about childcare and who is going to take care of this child as you are family planning. And having a conversation with a grandparent at that time is a great place to start.
Yeah, we've seen, just due to the lack of childcare, that if you're not on a list before the baby arrives, you're probably going to be in a real pinch.
Yeah, that's been a huge issue across the state of Kansas. And I know K-State and K-State Research and Extension have been doing research and needs assessments and talking with child care providers and building up the child care system across the state. And so a lot of work is in place, but that doesn't escape the reality for us that child care is still a significant issue in the state of Kansas, and access is the key component to that.
I think a lot of grandparents do want to spend time with their grandchildren, but as you mentioned, maybe only up to a certain point. So how do you have that conversation with your child that I want to be a good grandparent, but don't count on me full time.
Yeah, and actually the way that you phrase that would be an awesome way to sort of start a conversation. I want to be an involved grandparent and spend time with the child and, have a meaningful relationship with them. But I also want to be able to continue to engage in my own hobbies and, community engagements, or I want to continue to be able to work part-time. So outlining your own values and expectations is key so that it's not about, I don't want to watch the child. It's about, I want to have this meaningful relationship with the child, but I also am going to continue to prioritize myself.
Talk a little bit about the benefits of that intergenerational concept, because you mentioned that you spent time with your grandparents. What are some of the things that the grandchild benefits from?
Yeah, so there's so much wisdom and learning that can come from spending time with an older person in your family or in your community. Just sort of that transferring of knowledge and experience, but also having a role model, someone else to look up to that's a positive influence on a child's life. And for the older adult themselves, engaging in this sort of intergenerational space keeps them active, engaged, and helps to reduce social isolation and loneliness, which can have very negative health outcomes. And so we see that it's a mutually beneficial relationship when we have grandparent-grandchild relationships or great-grandparent, great-grandchild relationships. It really can be a wonderful thing with so many advantages as long as we're doing it within the parameters that make everyone comfortable.
We kind of talked about this a little bit during COVID, but what can they do if there's someone who happens to be a grandparent who's on the other side of the country, for instance?
Yeah, so there's so many great ways that we can connect now. And unfortunately, COVID was a spur for some of these technologies, or really helped encourage us to utilize technology in a better way. And so utilizing the video communication, or what would commonly be called FaceTime, is a great way to stay engaged. There's ways that you can record videos and send those as well. I've seen people have those electronic picture frames, and you can send pictures to those wirelessly. And so, the grandparent themselves doesn't have to manipulate the technology at all. It just magically pops up, and however technology miracle that is. But there's some different ways that we can continue to engage via technology, whether it's FaceTiming, sending pictures over different technology or videos, but also thinking about the days-old practice of sending a handwritten card, sending pictures that your kiddos draw and create. All of these things can make a big difference and help enhance a relationship, even though we're not right next door to each other.
I think Facebook was kind of originally designed to do this. It's morphed into other things now, but still another way to kind of keep up to date on what's happening in people's lives. And when they go to the pumpkin patch or something like that, you can see a photo of that.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I try to post pictures of my family every once in a while on social media, just because I do have older family members who are on social media, and I know that's how they keep up with everyone. And so that's wonderful, a great utilization of technology and those platforms for them. And so it's an easy way. Some people are already posting things on their social media pages where that can be a fun way for a grandparent to follow along.
It sounds like the keys here are setting boundaries and having good communication.
Absolutely. And, at the end of the day, communication is always a route to healthy relationships in all aspects of life. And so making sure that that is a top priority when we're navigating this transition to grandparenthood is key. And also maintaining those boundaries and really respecting your own wishes, respecting yourself is huge, because we want to make sure that we're living the life that we want to live, not the life that our children want us to live, for example.
They appreciate the help, but there's some give and take on both sides is really what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Making sure that we're seeing things from multiple perspectives and working to understand one another via communication is really important.
That's Kansas State University Aging and Adult Development Specialist Erin Martinez, with information on communication and boundaries being two key elements to navigating the transition to becoming a grandparent. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. and this is the K-State Radio Network.